So let's listen to Bernie Sanders.
Great, it's a pleasure to have you in New York City. I know that you have been openly advocated for this White House to do something immediate to help the people of Gaza, food and aid. They have apparently done that. Can you talk a little bit about how receptive the White House and the administration have been to outside pressure?
Well, I think, first off, this is something, Alex, they've been thinking about for a while, because what they see, what you see, what I see is almost an unprecedented humanitarian disaster. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of children facing starvation. We're talking about Israeli bombs of making it impossible for humanitarian aid to get to places that is needed, that the borders are being blockaded, and aid is unable to get through. So I think what the president is doing is an important step forward, but we need to do more. We need to tell Netanyahu and his right-wing government that they're going to have to open those borders. The United States of America, and I think the rest of the world, is not going to allow hundreds of thousands of kids to starve to death. So we need a new approach to Israel. For many, many years, we have given them a lot of money. Recently, there was a vote. I voted against it to give them another $14 billion. My view, not another nickel for Netanyahu's government if he's going to continue this wholesale slaughter of the Palestinian people.
That's the thing I can't really reconcile, right? We're airdropping aid at the same time as the U.S. is sending weapons of war over to Israel. I mean, how do you reconcile that? Is the right hand not talking to the left hand?
You can't reconcile it. It's totally absurd. And on top of that, look, the airdrops are very important, but that is not as important as opening up the borders, because you're going to need hundreds and hundreds of trucks every single day. And our message to Netanyahu, you know what? You're not going to get another nickel unless you open those borders and prevent the starvation, which is imminent.
You say it's your message to Netanyahu, but I wonder if it's not also the message to President Biden, right? I mean, I have to read this passage because I think, we don't cover Gaza every day. It is an ongoing, appalling situation. And this is what's happening for people who have tuned this out for domestic politics, which of course are important as well. But listen to this. It was hunger that drove Ibrahim al-Rifi from his house in Gaza at 2 a.m. on Thursday. It had been months since he could find bread for his wife and daughters in war-ravaged northern Gaza. Flour sold for close to $1,000 a bag. And even the animal feed many had turned to was running out. Some people are eating grass, according to the United Nations.
It is an unprecedented disaster, Alex. I mean, it makes my stomach turn when you think about it. And by the way, there are children right now who are suffering from severe malnutrition, who will suffer permanent damage. If all the food in the world came in tomorrow, they have already been permanently damaged. So the word has got to go out that we must demand a total change in what Netanyahu is doing. We got to put an end to this bloody war right now. Netanyahu and the Israeli government have got to start supporting the concept of a two-state solution so that maybe...
I mean, what value does this have at this point? Besides giving the Bernie Sanders industrial complex the ability to do content and say, oh, God, finally, Bernie's here where we're at, finally. Not quite, because he won't say ceasefire genocide, but he's speaking in these terms. But really, what value does this have? What value does Bernie Sanders saying this is a devastating humanitarian effort, what value does that have 30,000 dead bodies later? When just 10,000 dead bodies ago, you weren't saying this. You know what I'm saying? Like, what value does what value does it have of for a person who has been supporting what was going on and speaking against stopping or speaking against a ceasefire? For 75% of the time that this has been going on, and now the last 25% of it, now he's flipped it. So I don't, but in liberal spaces, in liberal media, in social democrat spaces, this is groundbreaking. This is what Jacobin will write an article about. Bernie Sanders says this, like what we said 5 months ago. But social democrat.
Maybe there will finally be peace in that region.
I mean, it seems like political pressure might be one thing to get the administration to take a more aggressive posture vis-a-vis Netanyahu. And I wonder what you made of the results from the Michigan primary earlier this week. Over 100,000 people voting uncommitted as an effective protest vote against this administration.
Now, understand Bernie Sanders is a social democrat. I'm sure he's going to say the idea is good because the idea in the end is only uncommitted in the primary. Now, he would say something different about the abandoned Biden campaign. So let's listen to what Bernie says.
Well, it tells me, and I think it tells the White House, that there are large numbers of young people, large numbers of minority people, large numbers of Americans who are sick and tired of the slaughter of the Palestinian people. And again, this is not some distant thing. This is with our tax dollars. Those guns and the planes largely or significantly are paid for by U.S. tax dollars. So the word is, again, I mean, we cannot continue to support this right-wing extremist government. No more money. We must demand a fundamental change of policy.
Do you think that this could be an issue that could decide the 2020, if not entirely, you think this could be a deciding factor in the election?
Well, I mean, people have got to know that, Trump is, even more pro-Israel than Biden has been.
Oh, so
but
he's going to genocide
harder.
harder.
Of young people, people of color.
Is that what Bernie is trying to say? You're trying to say that Donald Trump is going to genocide harder than this genocide. So we are now at the point of lesser of two genociders. Where do we go from here with this lesser of two evil argument? But let's continue with the video.
People of Arab descent saying, you know what, I don't like Trump, but I'm not going to come out and vote. So it could be decisive in that sense.
There's some data that the Washington Post went through. It's exit polling data comparing Trump's support in 2024 versus his support in 2016 from these early primary states. And it looks like he's running the same this year as he did with Republican women in 2016. He's gotten a higher share of conservative voters and older voters. He has done slightly worse among young voters. So it seems if you're a Democratic strategist, you're someone running for president, which you have done before, and you know the landscape well, young voters are going to be really important for this Democratic president who's seeking to return to office for another 4 years. Do you have, is there a strategy you think, President, setting aside the immediate calls that you have articulated vis-a-vis?
Setting aside what would actually get people to come out and vote for him, which is a ceasefire, set that aside. Set the answer aside. Can you come up with some other answer?
Prime Minister Netanyahu, is there a strategy that President Biden should be pursuing outside of that?
There is. Look, I think President Biden has established a good record over the last 4 years. There's a lot that he has to be proud of. We took this country under his leadership out of the pandemic and the economic downturn from the pandemic a lot faster than people thought. We have started to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. We're putting more money into transforming our energy system and dealing with climate change. He's been a strong supporter of women's right to control their own bodies, et cetera, et cetera. He has a good record. But I think what he's got to talk to the American people about is an understanding that despite our accomplishments over the last 3.5 years, ordinary Americans have been hurting for decades. We don't talk about it. Real inflation accounted for wages today, Alex, are lower than they were 50 years ago.
Yeah.
We're seeing massive levels of inequality. The very, very rich are getting richer.
You see her getting antsy about this. You see her moving, fidgeting a lot more. This is not where I wanted you to take this, Bernie. Let's see if she readjusts
of our people continue to live paycheck to paycheck. We have a healthcare system which is dysfunctional, a childcare system which is collapsing. Meanwhile, the people on top doing phenomenally well. Corporate profits are soaring. I think the president has been good. He's been out on a picket line for striking workers for the first time in American history. I applaud him for that. He's got to get up there and say, look, give me a second term. Give me real democratic control over the House and the Senate. You know what? We're going to take on the ruling class of this country. We're going to take on greedy corporations, and we're going to provide an economy that works for working people, not just the 1%. I think if he gets that message out, he could win this election.
Same message you've been
the
saying.
thing they're hung up on is his age, but nobody ever brought up your age. Nobody ever brings up your age. What's the secret?
Well, I think we make a mistake. Age is one factor, Alex, but what's more important is what somebody does, what somebody stands for.
Yeah. But I mean, you said, it's a very fungible concept, this idea of too old. You're impermeable. You can't touch Bernie Sanders on it. We're going to continue this conversation after a quick break. Back with me now.
It's quite silly watching the establishment on TV pretend like the sheer number when we're talking age is what people are hung up on. Age is what you guys use to refer to his dementia. We don't call it age. You do. We clearly see a difference in him. This guy literally walks like he's about to fall every step. He walks like this. Like a person who's trying not to fall. You know what I'm saying? Like he's clearly barely able to hold his own body weight on his leg. That's how gingerly he's walking. But anyway, that's her pretending as if she doesn't get it. Oh, actually, there's a little bit left in this video.
Now is Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator, what's it like trying to govern with a party that's not actually interested in governance?
It is very distressing. I'll give you an example of it. I think
here's where this is where it did cut off. Yeah, I'm not going. He's going into blue Democrat mode to talk about the blue-red infighting game. Just not interested in that. Let's go to this other interview he did with what's her name? Caitlin. Is her name here? No, it's not listed here. Anyway, he talks a little bit more about what's happening in Palestine and is there two videos? What's happening with Palestine and the uncommitted campaign. Is there a second video I'm missing here? It says part 2, but maybe not. All right, so it says part 1. I'm sorry, but let's play it.
Senator, thank you for being here. It's great to sit down with you. We saw the Democratic primary layout in Michigan, and over 100,000 voters voted uncommitted in a protest of how President Biden has handled the war that Israel is waging in Gaza. Is that a warning sign to the White House in your view?
I think it is. I think all over this country, people are looking at what's going on in Gaza and really cannot believe what they're seeing. It's not only that 30,000 Palestinians have been killed and 70,000 wounded, 2/3 of whom are women and children. But Caitlin, what we are looking at this moment is the starvation of hundreds of thousands of children. And that is because of Israeli bombardments, and that is because of the restrictions at the border preventing humanitarian aid from getting in. This is absolutely unacceptable. And in my view, I've said this a million times, the United States should not be giving Netanyahu and his extreme right-wing government another nickel for their war efforts that are killing so many innocent Palestinians.
When the White House says, we're listening to these voters who have that same exact concern that you do about the aid that is going to Israel with no restrictions on it, the president has sent campaign aides to talk to Arab Americans. He's sent White House officials, including national security aides. But should he himself be having these conversations directly?
It's not whether it's him or his aides. It's what the policy is. That's what's important. And what the president has got to do, in my view, is tell Netanyahu, sorry, you're not getting another nickel of U.S. taxpayer money to murder women and children in Gaza. That has to be a major change in the Israeli policies. It has a lot to do with the two-state solution and where we go at the end of this war.
If he doesn't do that, do you think those 100,000 voters won't come home in November?
Well, I don't want. Nobody can speculate it. Nobody knows. You haven't talked to 100,000 of them lately.
This is where he puts on his Vote Blue hat to downplay if those people will come out. Really? You have no clue, Bernie?
Nobody has. So, but I do think this. The contrast between Biden and Trump is pretty clear. And I think most of those people who voted for uncommitted understand that. Biden has done, by and large,
he's saying most of the people who voted uncommitted understand that Biden is far better than Donald Trump still. So is he saying he understands the people part of the uncommitted campaign are social democrats? Again, uncommitted campaign is not built the same way as the abandoned Biden campaign. That abandoned Biden campaign is going 50 states in November. Don't vote for Joe Biden. This is only saying in the primary. They're not even going as far as to say anything else. Anytime you say, what about November? Well, we want him to change course because they don't want to acknowledge that the people running it, the Andy Levines, the Rashida Tlaibs, they are going to be supporting Joe Biden, regardless of supporting this genocide.
Good job for working people. He understands that climate change is real. And on the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who is a pathological liar, who wants to deny every woman in America the right to control her own body, who doesn't even understand that climate change is real. So I think the choice is clear, but I think there are a lot of people who are upset about
Joe Biden. What does it do that Joe Biden says the climate change is real, but he does nothing about it, versus a person who says, I don't believe climate change is real? I would say that the person who says, I don't believe climate change is real makes more sense than the person who says, I do believe climate change, but I'm not going to make any measurable contribution to fixing climate change, or I would just go ahead and do a little bit of good and a little bit of bad so it kind of washes out.
the president's policies regarding the war in Israel.
You've been really outspoken in calling for a ceasefire, and you're a champion of policies on the left. I mean, everyone witnessed your runs for president. You, though, have also faced some of what President Biden has when he's out speaking publicly, which is people calling for ceasefires or calling for you to call it a genocide, something that you have not.
Yeah, I know. That's true. But I don't know that we want to be arguing whether it's a mass slaughter or a genocide. It's kind of a technical term.
Why don't white social democrats, why don't you find it important to label a genocide a genocide? You don't feel it's important to label slavery slavery? So I'm not even going to go there. But anyway, it's astonishing to me. He's trying to make it seem like it's trivial whether or not to label something a genocide. That is not even serious. That's not a serious position.
That the International Court of Justice is looking at. Look, the real issue is, with 30,000 dead and 70,000 wounded and hundreds of thousands of children starving to death, I would hope that every sane American wants this war ended and ended right now. And that's the role that the United States has got to play. And we have a special role because we have supported Israel for many, many years, $3.5 billion in military aid every year. And now there are those in Congress who want to give them another $10 billion to continue this war. So I think the goal right now is for us to rally around the effort to say no more military aid for Netanyahu in this terrible war.
That's Bernie Sanders doing what social democrats do. They ride the fence. They play both sides because they want to be down with the cool crowd, the radicals, but they also want to be a part of the establishment and get all the toils, the sort of treasures, the toys that you get for being the buffer class to the establishment.